Eckhart Tolle says, if you find yourself in a situation that you find to be undesirable, then either change it or accept it, because all else is madness. Now that sentiment is all well and good, but what if you're in a situation that you don't like, but you believe you should be able to change it, but you're struggling to figure out how? In situations like this, acceptance sounds like you're just giving up on your goals. You're giving up on the things that you want to be able to change. How do you reconcile that in these kinds of situations? And I'm going to loop back and address this. But before that, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with what we're talking about when we're talking about acceptance. So firstly, acceptance is not passive. It's very, very active. So when you feel defeated or you give up, it's this sort of passive, I just feel like I've had all the fight taken out of me and I'm just going to lie down here because I've become immobilized. Whereas acceptance is much more about a choice and a letting go of something. Also, acceptance doesn't mean that nothing will change. Au contraire, in my experience, acceptance often turbocharges changes. But if I then try to accept in order to turbocharge those changes, then it messes up the whole process because it's not really acceptance. So it can be a bit of a head tangle trying to unpick how do I do this acceptance thing? And actually, importantly, why would I even do it? Personally, I found acceptance practices to be the most life-changing thing I've ever learned to do. A couple of years ago, when I decided to start writing a book, I took myself off to this shepherd's hut for a weekend where I was going to switch off from technology and just write. And I'd set myself this ambitious goal of writing 20,000 words in a weekend. And I'd picked this shepherd's hut because there was this orchard where you could pick fruits, there was this fire pit, and I just had this really romanticized view of what this weekend was going to be like. I was going to be in this state of inspiration. I was going to be connected to nature. But when I arrived, the shepherd's hut was actually at the end of someone's front garden. It was practically on a main road. And what I hadn't taken into account was that it was August, so the fruit had fallen from the orchard and was fermenting on the ground, and so there were wasps everywhere. And I am pretty phobic when it comes to wasps. I tried to write, but I felt completely blocked. And I find myself spiraling. And I'm spiraling into these feelings of imposter syndrome. I mean, who am I to write a book? I hate writing. That's why I do YouTube. And shame for being so frightened of the wasps. At one point I get in my car because I think I'm just going to abandon this and go back to London. And then I'm feeling shame about that decision. And then when I'm at the point where I feel like I just want to crawl out of my own skin, there's a little voice in my head that says, what if you don't write a single word this weekend and that's okay? What if this weekend is not about writing, but about something completely different? And as I contemplated that, I just had a moment where I just surrendered. I lay down on the bed in the shepherd's hut and I just surrendered to this feeling, whatever this was. And then what happened was I just felt this wave of complete peace come over me. And I laid there maybe for about 20 minutes and I just enjoyed that feeling of peace and relief. And then I got my laptop out and I started to write. And so it wasn't until I let go of this outcome that I felt like I had to have that I was then able to get the outcome that I wanted. So sometimes people say, but how do you accept? What is the process of acceptance? And it's a tricky one because it's like a letting go. So it's a little bit like saying, how do you fall asleep at night? How do you sleep? When sleep is something that happens when we are able to let go and our body will drop into the state of sleep. So it's easier to understand acceptance by understanding what non-acceptance looks like, by looking at the opposite. So non-acceptance is often, this shouldn't be like this, or I'm what's wrong. But it's mainly this sense that things, or me, is not what it is supposed to be. So then acceptance can sound like it's like, well, things are exactly as they're supposed to be, and I'm exactly as I'm supposed to be. So well, what is there to do? What's the point? But it's this idea that we're not perfect, and that's okay. And we are still trying to grow and understand ourselves. and we're not there yet, and that's okay. That you can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. One helpful way to think of like how to do acceptance is, I sometimes think of it as it's a type of forgiveness. So let's say somebody did something that hurt you and they're sorry and they made a mistake, and you decide to forgive them. And so if you really forgive them, there's a letting go that happens in that. You're not saying that what they did was okay and that was absolutely fine, but you're also not holding on to this resentment and this idea that it shouldn't have been like that, it shouldn't have been like that. You accept that they did that thing, you accept that, they've acknowledged that, hopefully, and then you're able to move on. So when we're in a state of non-acceptance or resistance, sometimes the way in is, what is it or who is it I need to forgive? And often it's ourselves. So when you're in that place of self-judgment, it's like, can you forgive yourself for being an imperfect human being who gets confused, who seems to make the same mistakes over and over again? That is a very human thing to do. You would probably forgive other people for repeatedly making the same mistake. It's offering it to yourself as well. At some point, you realize there's nothing to forgive when you accept what it is to actually be a human being on the planet. But to get there, sometimes we just get there through forgiveness. So it could even be forgiving a situation for not being the way it is, or forgiving a person for not being the way you think that they should be. And because I have had moments of such profound peace through acceptance, I made a bit of a mistake for quite a long time. I think this really got in my way for a few years, was I thought that the goal was to live in a perpetual state of acceptance. If I just accepted everything, situations and myself, then I would live in that perpetual state of peace. And I still think that would probably be true. But what I needed to do also was to accept that I am a human being who is going to be grumpy, frustrated, judgmental, selfish at times. And so again, this is another example of how acceptance changes something, because let's say, so I really don't want to be a judgmental person. I want to be a kind person. Now, when judgments come up, or when I am just in a judgmental, stroppy mood, if I can notice that and accept, like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm experiencing a lot of judgments at this time, the very acceptance of that and the acceptance of myself, the judgments start to fall away. It's the famous Carl Rogers quote that goes, "The paradox is, only when I accept myself, then I can change." So having a practice of acceptance also means accepting the difficult emotions as well, because when they are accepted, the energy is released for those emotions to move through. But if I'm feeling something and then I start judging myself for feeling that, I start making myself wrong, I start thinking that I should be holding myself to this higher standard, that's when the emotions get blocked. That's when I'm likely to spiral into something. And for me, that often manifests as a very low mood and low energy, because all my energy is going into this resistance and this idea that I should somehow be above all this because I've done so much work on myself. Where's my self-actualization? Where's my enlightenment? But the very thing in turning those things into things to obtain comes from the non-acceptance of where I am now. So when I first set up this channel a couple of weeks ago now, I was really excited, and I had this week of feeling absolutely inspired and full of these creative ideas of what I wanted to do. My energy was high and I felt great. And then a couple of days ago, my energy kind of crashed. And I was feeling really uninspired and not creative. And I thought, what have you done, Sarah? You've set up another YouTube channel. You're not going to be able to come up with ideas or create useful videos for people. And I realized when I stopped and checked in with myself, I thought, what am I believing about my role in this? And I realized I believed that the crash, because I had a crash and I wasn't feeling creative, I was really believing that was somehow my fault. That there was somehow something I could have done differently, which would have meant I would have stayed at that high level of creativity and never wavered. So when I identified that and I could accept that, it was first of all I could accept that, oh look, I'm trying to blame myself for this change in my mood, this change in my energy levels. Okay, I can accept that I'm doing it, but I can see how that's not serving me and how it may not be true. And then that also then helped me to accept my energy levels had changed. And when I accepted that my energy levels had dropped, my energy came back up again. So what if you're hearing this and you're going like, okay, this makes some cognitive sense. I'm going to try and do some of this acceptance stuff. So I work with food and body image a lot. So let's say you're trying to accept your body because you cognitively know, if I could just accept my body as it is today, I would feel better in my body. So you cognitively know that. But there's something in you that it's just like a no. And it's a felt no. It's like you can't get there with cognitive reasoning. It's a block that is in your body. If this is your experience with anything, you feel like accepting it would be beneficial, but there's a strong resistance to accepting it, just accept the resistance. So that feeling, that part of you that says, no, we can't do this, is probably trying to protect you. It's scared. So we want to meet that part with tender acceptance, accepting that there is a part that feels scared and blocked. Because I see people fighting with themselves with the acceptance thing because they're struggling to accept. But maybe just accepting yourself for struggling to accept is what will start to loosen things up. But if you're in a situation that you feel like you should be able to do it differently, and so you're thinking, what, am I just supposed to accept this situation, or am I supposed to keep trying to do it differently? Acceptance is only about accepting now. You are not accepting a future. You are not accepting a potential outcome. You are just accepting the now. Because everything that is outside of your control, we want to be accepting. Because if it's outside of our control anyway, acceptance is going to help us there, because it's going to help us be able to take control of what we can. So, every single thing that you have said and done up to this very moment now, watching this video, is outside of your control. So if you are beating yourself up for the past, beating yourself up for all these things that you said or didn't say or didn't do, you are not accepting things that are completely outside of your control. And because our sense of who we are is based on the past, like I can only know who I am, who this identity is here today, based on my memory of who I am, which is based on the past. So self-acceptance is accepting the past. It's not accepting a future version of yourself, because that version doesn't even exist. And when it does, well, that will then be now. So if you're in this situation where you are feeling stuck and you don't know whether you're supposed to be accepting or doing something, like I said, acceptance isn't passive. So it's grounding yourself in the moment and accepting the moment. So like what I was describing with my mood, I accepted that my mood was low, my energy was low, and I accepted that my mind was taking me into some kind of self-blame. I wasn't accepting that my mood is always going to be low and I'm always going to be blaming myself. So sometimes it can help to really identify, what is the situation now? What is it I'm believing? What is it I'm feeling? And can I just accept these things in this moment? If I accepted that this was my reality now, and I didn't believe it was wrong, and I didn't believe that it shouldn't be like this, then what action might I take? Because then you're taking action from a non-resistant place. You will have more energy for action. You will start to gain more clarity to know what to do next. And so if what you're experiencing in this moment is just confusion about what to do, then name that confusion. See if you can allow and accept the confusion itself. This was so helpful for me when I was healing my relationship with food. There were many occasions where I would just say to myself, right now I just feel so confused about what to eat. And having a moment to allow that confusion often let it clear a bit, and I started to get a bit of an idea about what might be the best choice for me to make in that moment. Confusion's not a bad thing. It's fertile ground for new possibilities. Better to be confused than to be so certain about something that turns out to be wrong. So I want to take us a full loop round and end on another Eckhart Tolle quote. Accept this moment as if you had chosen it. Always work with it, not against it, and this will transform your life.